The vote has been taken. Give us a sense, first, in terms of just help our listeners. What does this actually mean? And then we'll get to some of the responses and where we go from here. But what exactly did the vote do?
From outside Jerusalem in Israel, the bill that was passed has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to significantly limit the power of the Israeli Supreme Court to review actions taken by the government. In the context of separation of powers and checks and balances, the bill significantly minimizes the court's power. We in Israel have always said we are the only democracy in the Middle East. And I think it's not an exaggeration to suggest that if this really goes through, then we are teetering somewhere between democracy and dictatorship. The two countries that have similar systems are Hungary and Poland. And the if it really goes through is because for the following reason. Petitions have been filed to the Israeli Supreme Court against the law. We're waiting to see if a judge will issue a temporary restraining order or an interim order to allow the court to hear petitions against the bill. 24 hours have passed since the petitions were filed. We're literally all waiting for the judge to decide whether or not he issues it. If he issues it, there will be pretty significant court hearings. If he decides not to issue it, then the bill all but guaranteed will become law. It still requires the signature of the president. To the best of my understanding, a president of the state, which is largely a figurehead, has never not signed the bill passed by the parliament. That, too, is a question, though, knowing this particular president, I have no confidence in him whatsoever. Today is frankly, a difficult day. For those of us who are optimists like me, John Paul Jones said, I've yet to begin to fight, I think, with him. I fully subscribe to that. This will be an all-in, full-scale battle and quotations. I certainly hope it doesn't become violent. That's always a possibility. Last night there were demonstrations, rallies in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I was in Jerusalem for 12 hours yesterday. Police lost control. That is where we are. Today's Tuesday. I've demonstrated for 7 straight days. I participated in a 60-kilometer march in 100-degree heat. There's no plan B. When you're fighting fascism, it's a full-time job.
Yeah, wow. So many things to unpack and dig into there. So just to be clear on the only remaining step in terms of this action is the president's signature. Is that correct?
If the Supreme Court decides not to hear it, but if the Supreme Court hears the case, all bets are off. Most people who are court observers will tell you that even if the court hears it, they're skeptical if the court will overturn the legislation, which they can, which they certainly can, which is why there's, if you will, a three-step process. Petition submitted, waiting for an interim order, not issued, then it goes right to the president. Issued, then we have full hearings before the Supreme Court.
Okay, and so as that marches forward, and as we look at that, give us a little sense in terms of kind of on the street. What's the reaction? We know you've been part of some of these marches and opposition. Give us a sense, kind of the lay of the land in terms of where are the people now in terms of viewing this? What are they seeing? What's the overall sense there?
I think it's going to depend on your political perspective. Those of us, frankly, like me, who are liberal Democrats, are deeply, deeply concerned. I have friends who hate the word apocalyptic, but I have friends who are really concerned. And I have friends like me and us who are optimistic about the fight ahead. For those who support the legislation, I don't think they understand at all what all the noise is about. Those who understand the significance of a government not subject to checks and balances, if you don't think that way, then, this was just another day. They're not understand the noise. If you understand it, then you are deeply concerned. One of the questions that was just asked in a public opinion poll, what percentage of the Israeli public thinks that we are potentially reaching the point of what we in American English would call a civil war? Even those who support the legislation, quick translation of the numbers, is about a third of them think actually that may happen. Those who oppose the legislation are close to 60%. That's a lot of people. Not only that, but just taking into consideration, I think literally a few minutes ago, Moody's, which does financial listing of countries, is going to downturn the Israeli rating, which will impact investors. U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin spoke with Israeli Defense Minister Gallant earlier this evening, saying that you people must have a broad consensus. President Biden could not have been clear. Get stumbling last week, which is most unfortunate. The U.S. needs to make it very clear to Israel that these bills are not in accordance with the democratic values that the United States values and treasures. And you and I have discussed this before. I'm fully on board with the U.S. cutting aid to Israel as a way to signal a clear message to Israel that this cannot continue.
As you look at that path forward, there are a lot of murky twists and turns, I think, that are yet to be played out in this whole thing. But again, going back to the core principle of all of this, that separation of powers is such a crucial component to any democracy, any constitutional republic. And the fact that that is being undermined by this particular legislation has to be concerning for everyone. A lot of people kind of conflate everything, for Israel, against Israel. This is one of those, regardless of where you fall on aid or military connections or whatever. To me, this is one of those central principles that everybody should be saying, wait a minute, this is a very slippery slope. This is a very dangerous path. And what it could do, because I agree with you, Amos, in terms of the liberal democracy in the area is Israel, and it is a crucial ally, and I think how this moves forward really matters. Anything else you're kind of watching for, or things that we should be watching for as we go through this process? As you said, petition's been filed. We'll wait to see if the Supreme Court decides to hear that when it moves to the president and so on. What else are you watching for, things that might be an indicator in terms of what comes next?
So last night's rallies and demonstrations, which were the two main ones in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, what you saw was hundreds of thousands of primarily young people. The two words I would use to describe them, and this is important to your question, they were absolutely fearless and full of rage, and fearless when they were getting sprayed by the water cannons, which are uncomfortable. Obviously, injuries are caused. But they weren't going anywhere. It was like a sit-in on the street, and they weren't going anywhere. And the police at some point backed off because I think the police commissioner, who's complicated in his own way, but it's a different conversation, he at some point gave an order evidently to the police to back off because he became concerned that there would be injuries. Were there injuries last night? Yes. Could it have been worse? Yes. Are there people who are at the point of saying, to protect democracy, I don't want to be dramatic here and say, people want to be heard. Nobody wants to be heard. But if this is what it takes, this is maybe what it takes. What really was pretty extraordinary yesterday was while these demonstrations were going on, they were heated, sometimes violent. Not a single member of the government took to the airways to speak to the public. One. Two, yes, at the end of yesterday's vote, Prime Minister Netanyahu left the parliament, the Knesset, as soon as he could. I make the argument that, to me it's clear, but, to Israelis, three opinions, he's prime minister in name only. He's been leapfrogged over, passed by the justice minister, who's an extreme right-wing member of Netanyahu's party, and the police minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's a convicted racist, inciter, and violent, convicted. They have leapfrogged him, in my opinion, and they are in many ways in charge of the government. And that, pardon my English, needs to scare the hell out of the American administration.
Yeah, and that will be the fascinating thing to watch in the days ahead, is what the administration here in the United States continues to do in the days ahead, because they are going to have to continue to take that information in, process it, strategize it, act on it, and they have seemed to be a little slow to the party on a number of those core issues, and many stumbles along the way, but so many things to keep going there. Amos Guiora from the University of Utah, and again, joining us from just outside of Jerusalem in Israel. This is a crucial time in that country, crucial conversations around separation of powers, and Amos, as always, we appreciate your perspective and taking time to weigh in.
It's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll continue to keep our eyes on what is unfolding in Israel. I do think the vote that took place should be a little chilling. Again, regardless of where you fall on the Israeli issue, regardless of how you feel about the United States connection to, partnership with, ally of the Israeli state. This is one of those that should concern everyone. That checks and balances are so crucial to any kind of democracy, whether it's a constitutional republic like ours or a liberal democracy like Israel has. When you start to undermine that authority of the checks and balances, that's never a good direction. So this requires our attention. It demands the attention of the administration. And I think the conversations happening behind the scenes are going to be absolutely vital, and those that are said out in public in terms of what this means to the U.S.-Israel alliance and what it means for the future. All things we have to look at beyond the headlines today. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
Did you miss the movie show last Friday where we talked about Barbie and Oppenheimer, also known as Barbenheimer?
It's supposed to be Up and Barbie.
Plus a new movie from the original Studio C cast in their first feature-length comedy. Go to KSLPodcast.com, get to the movie show page, and listen to the show and see what we thought of it.
That's KSLPodcasts.com.
And we're live here outside the Perez family home, just waiting for the... And there they go, almost on time this morning. Mom is coming out the front door strong with a double-arm kid carry. Looks like Dad has the bags. Daughter is bringing up the rear. Oh, but the diaper bag wasn't closed. Diapers and toys are everywhere. Ooh, but Mom has just nailed the perfect car seat buckle for the toddler. And now the eldest daughter, who looks to be about 9 or 10, has secured herself in the booster seat. Dad zips the bag closed, and they're off. But looks like Mom doesn't realize her coffee cup is still on the roof of the car. And there it goes. Oh, that's a shame. That mug was a fam favorite.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are buckled correctly in the right seat for their age and size. Learn more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Visit nhtsa.gov/the
We
right
just have to
seat.
do it.
Brought to you by
We do it
NHTSA
or
and the
not?
Ad Council.
If it's out of sight,
You do
it's
it.
out
Okay.
of mind.
Yes,
Even
if
though
we
that's
do it
an
in the
old
last break,
adage,
that's
it's
fine.
still very true today. And it's especially true of your old 401k. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, asking you to get that old 401k in sight and out of the company you no longer work for. But don't roll it into your new 401k. That could be one of the worst things you do. Of course that's easy. But when has the easiest way ever been the best way? Instead, call Trajan Wealth and learn about all of your options, including a way to earn an upfront bonus of up to 25% for your future income just for rolling it over. That's right. You could earn up to a 25% bonus for your retirement income just for rolling that 401k over with Trajan Wealth. Don't roll that 401k into your new company plan. Don't do it without calling Trajan Wealth first. Call 801-899-7600 or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Here's a question. Do you wear dentures? At Grandpa's Dental, you can trade in your floppy dentures and get $2,000 towards an implant-supported solution. You know, they say the older you get, the more you need your teeth. Well, chewing your food isn't a luxury. And taking a bite out of a nice, juicy steak, well, it takes teeth. At Grandpa's Dental, they have over 10,000 restorations under their belt, and it's always affordable. When you walk into one of their 3 locations, you're family, period. At Grandpa's Dental, they live their family legacy by building lasting relationships through state-of-the-art services. So if you want to stop the flop and actually eat foods you can chew, trade in your dentures at Grandpa's Dental for $2,000 toward your implant solution. Schedule your free consultation at grandpasdental.com today. That's grandpasdental.com.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, Utah's governor and attorney general are demanding TikTok respond to court orders about its business operations involving young people. Second, a road rage incident caught on camera led to an arrest in Utah County. Third, Bronny James, the son of LeBron James, suffered a cardiac arrest during basketball practice at USC, currently in the hospital in stable condition. Right now, 91 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, headlines for weeks now have been saying that a strike was looming at UPS as the union and company negotiated a contract for workers. And while the negotiations were tough and took a great deal of time, more than I think a lot of folks were comfortable with, it was just announced today that a deal's been reached. A large worker strike's been averted. But we wanted to dig into that in terms of what is actually in the contract. What does that mean? How involved was the Biden administration in the case? And what does it do in terms of setting a precedent and a path moving forward from here? We're really pleased to have joining us on the program today Seth Harris, a professor at Northeastern University and a senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change, where he runs the Initiative on Labor and Economic Justice. Previously, you may recall, he served as acting U.S. Secretary of Labor, a member of President Obama's cabinet, and Deputy U.S. Secretary of Labor from 2009 to 2014. And Seth, thank you so much for making some time for us today. You've seen, watched, and been in the middle of some of these kinds of conversations and negotiations. Give us your sense of what have we seen played out and what ultimately happened today.
Well, first of all, Boyd, thanks for having me on. A pleasure to be with you. We saw a collective bargaining and union representation in action, and we saw a highly motivated Teamsters membership who elected new leadership that promised them no more concessions and no more two-tiered employment arrangements where newer workers got worse benefits and worse pay than longer tenured employees. And we saw a company that was willing to sit down, obey the law, deal with its union, scream at its union, fight with its union, and ultimately come to a deal with its union. And that's how collective bargaining is supposed to work. Maybe a little less yelling and a little more agreeing, but it was a very, very good outcome. And again, it shows the importance of union representation for workers in the United States. The Teamsters at UPS are going to see a material and significant improvement in the quality of their work lives and the quality of I think it's a big success for everybody.
Yeah, and as you look at how that all unfolded, I'm with you. A little less yelling is always good. We always try to elevate the conversations here. As you look at that, and this one in particular, I think everyone kind of had their eye on the fact that so many companies, a big chunk of the economy and America's spending are reliant on that delivery infrastructure in terms of transportation, particularly of packages. What do you see in terms of, does this really give us a good, stable path forward? Is this a quick fix, or does this really have some staying power for the long haul?
No, I think that's a very important question. And, UPS has been an immensely profitable company for the last half decade, maybe even a little longer than that. And a big part of the reason for that is the change in the industry that was birthed by e-commerce. Folks during the pandemic were sitting at home and ordering goods of all kinds. They were buying stuff for themselves, buying stuff for their kids from a variety of sources all over the world. And we saw a major increase, a substantial increase in the volume of packages delivered around the world, and UPS scooped up a huge amount of money for that. Let me also say the Teamsters benefited from that because they saw a very substantial increase in the number of members they had working at UPS. But I think this is going to be a sustainable agreement between UPS and the Teamsters, in part because it takes into account this higher level of profitability, this greater level of business that UPS and the entire industry are experiencing. But also they got rid of some real burrs under the saddle, some real irritations to the membership, the two-tiered employment relationship I mentioned earlier. They're going to air condition their trucks. Imagine driving around in the heat of summer like now in an un-air conditioned vehicle. It's unfathomable to us, particularly if you're lifting 50, 75, 100-pound packages. They also got rid of forced overtime, and they're going to increase the number of part-time workers who are working full-time, which will be a huge boon to those workers and give those workers economic stability. So what UPS is betting on is that they will have a more productive workforce. They'll have a workforce that's going to hang around, a long-tenured workforce, which means increased productivity for them. They're not going to have to go out and recruit folks. That saves them money. and they're going to be able to work in partnership with the union to carve out a path forward toward continued profitability. So again, I think it's a win-win relationship, and I think for consumers, it's going to come out very well.
Yeah, I think that stability, that certainty, but I love that you also include in that that it does create some staying power, that employees are going to stick around. It helps build culture. And that confidence that they can sustain it over the long haul. I want to dig in just real quickly. You came back to this idea of the two-tier. I know that there were also some changes in terms of the part-time workers, not just the new workers, in terms of kind of leveling that playing field just a little bit. Any other perspective on that that was significant, or other parts of this deal that maybe are past the headlines?
Yeah, I think that part-time arrangement is extremely important. The UPS had kept a lot of workers part-time to give themselves added flexibility, but obviously it left those workers with inadequate wages. So a lot of those workers are going to be moved into full-time jobs, not all of them, but many of them will be moved into full-time jobs, and they're going to get a meaningful pay increase. So the life of a part-time worker will be better at UPS, but also more of those workers will be full-time with full-time benefits and with more economic stability. So that's a terrific outcome for those workers. And again, their union made that possible.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you can really come at this from all points on the compass. And we always go back to this idea of the integrity of compromise, that's not a squishy thing. It's not a lay down thing. It's not a just take it because you have to kind of thing. But there is integrity in compromise when you do have those real conversations, even if the volume goes up a little bit from time to time. But if you can come away and say, okay, we got a good outcome that everybody can maybe not feel 1,000% great about, but if they can feel close to that and then be supportive moving forward, I think that's the other big piece of the puzzle. Is it's not always 100% agreement, it's 100% support once that decision, once that commitment, once that integrity of compromise actually kicks in. Seth Harris, professor at Northeastern University, senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change, where he runs the Initiative of Labor and Economic Justice, former acting U.S. Secretary of Labor during the Obama administration. Seth, thanks so much for joining us. Great perspective, great insight on what has happened. Negotiations work, compromise can be had, and it serves everybody, including the customers and the American people in the end. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Boyd.
All right, again, that's Seth Harris joining us today, and a good thing, I think, for everyone who is currently at work and on Amazon at the same time, placing an order. It's going to be delivered. The strike's been averted, and the trucks will keep rolling, and deliveries will keep happening. All right, we're going to go ahead and step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news, but do not go anywhere. We got some important conversations coming up for the back half of the 1 o'clock hour coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Officials are calling on people to check bodies of water around Utah this summer for algal blooms. This comes after more than 24 ducks died at Liberty Park, possibly from harmful algae. Dr. Hannah Bonner with Utah's Division of Water Quality says algae can make not only dogs but people very sick.
Anything from gastrointestinal illness, so vomiting, diarrhea, to rash, skin irritation, to, in severe cases, permanent organ damage.
Bonner says you need to keep your dogs leashed up and check the water for any weird texture or discoloration before you jump in. Utah's governor and attorney general are pressing TikTok to respond to court orders filed by the state on its effort to show the company is harming children. They filed a motion with the court demanding that TikTok show cause why it shouldn't be held in contempt for failing to respond. In a news release, Governor Spencer Cox says the state will insist that social media companies are accountable for the harm they're causing for Utah's young people. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Striking SAG-AFTRA actors rallied this morning in New York City's Times Square. Steve Buscemi addressed the crowd, reminding them what's at stake in the strike of actors against the film and TV corporations.
Fair pay, revenue sharing, health care, retirement funding, a fair casting process, AI protection, and fair compensation.
In the meantime, as just heard, the possible strike involving UPS drivers has been resolved with a tentative labor agreement with the Teamsters Union that still has to be ratified by Teamsters members. Our KSL weather is coming up next. It looks like we'll be Looking at 100 degrees through the rest of the week. KSL News Time, 1:31.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
The extracurricular activities, the traffic, the nightly homework, the traffic, the finding time to eat dinner together as a family, the traffic. Back to school can be stressful. Thanks to Ziploc, meal prep doesn't have to be. New Ziploc bags with Stay Open design have a patented stand-up bottom that helps keep the bag upright and a top crease that folds and holds for easy filling, unlocking a second set of hands in the kitchen. If only it unlocked a second set of lanes. New Ziploc brand freezer and storage bags with Stay Open design from S.C. Johnson, a family company.
Here's something you've never heard before.
Stop. This is Simply Safe.
Introducing 24/7 Lifeguard Protection, only from Simply Safe Home Security. Now, monitoring agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplysafe.com/radio. Advanced Home Security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
Your home is the place where you know your loved ones are secure. But the things that keep your home protected can't keep pests at bay. That's where RAID comes in. For 60 years, RAID scientists have worked to protect people around the world. With trusted research, ingredients, testing standards, and product efficacy, RAID seeks to create a better future for all, especially the ones you love most. RAID, protection for all.
Higher taxes, soaring inflation, record low interest rates, and the skyrocketing cost of healthcare. The list goes on. Retiring successfully today is a lot more complicated than ever before. Learn how you could tackle the biggest challenges that you'll face in retirement today. Don't miss a special edition of Retirement Solutions Radio. It's this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL News Radio 1027.
Tim and Amanda.
If this is the first time you've ever joined us, can we just say welcome, welcome? I hope you come back and see us again. Tim and I have been doing this for a long time, and we love what we do. But the best part of what we do always and will always be connecting with you.
How many times do we say people don't understand how much information and really love we get from that side of the radio?
Yes.
They thank us for giving it to them, but we get it back so many times.
Wake up with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda, 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We do have a good drive on the Valley freeways locally, but up north, way up north, some delays. Northbound I-15 approaching the Elwood area of Box Elder County. And don't forget, we still have a traffic light malfunctioning, jamming up traffic at State Street between 2100 South and the I-80 junction. From now through July, get triple rewards points on gas and travel with a Visa Platinum Rewards card from Cypress Credit Union. Visit cypresscu.com to learn more. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, another hot day with a high near 100. There's a chance for more thunderstorms, mainly over the mountains of central and southern Utah. The rest of the week is hot and dry with a high of 103 on Saturday. And right now, 91 degrees and sunny at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson. On Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
When it comes to our own health, physical health, mental health, it's so important for us to recognize that ignoring problems does not make them better, nor does it make them go away. Often dealing with those health challenges, again, whether it's mental or physical, is often the last priority for so many of us. In fact, some people are really good at making sure everyone else is taken care of, but they're the last priority. The pressures of life push in on everyone. And so we want to get into a discussion about how do we do that different? How do we take a little better care of ourselves? How can we avoid ignoring problems until they become so big, so painful that we just can't ignore them, or they become a major, major problem? And to help us break all of that down, we're thrilled to have back on the show, friend of the show, Gaynalyn Conde, very popular speaker and author and one of the great thinkers out there. Gaynalyn, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
You had an experience that really kind of set my mind in motion, and so let's start with your experience, and then we're going to take the principles of that and apply them to a couple of different scenarios.
Well, I was listening to your intro, and I thought, I think Boyd called and talked to my kids because they have been nagging me about what you're referring to for about a year and a half now. And so I thought, I think Boyd talked to both my children in writing that little intro piece. So for those that follow me on social media, I publicly shared with kind of blocking and blurring the actual picture of the tumor. But I just last week had a tumor of significant size that is non-cancerous removed from my back. And we knew it was there, and we had been watching it, and my kids had been nagging me. And for those that are familiar with my life this last year, I shattered my wrist in January, and there were just a number of other professional, personal, and medical issues that kept needing my attention. But this tumor on my back had gotten to the point where it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was starting to be painful. The doctors thought it was like pressing on a specific nerve. So as it was growing, and if I was standing too long, I couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
And so I went in and had it removed. It was bigger than they thought, and thus propelled me, as often my own personal journey does, to posting about it and sharing about the fact that sometimes we try to ignore things. And what is the pain level by which we continue to ignore? And then at what point does it cross that threshold that the pain becomes like it's screaming at you to take notice? And so, that's kind of the most recent of many lessons I've learned along this line over my 52 years on the planet.
Well, let's dig into this, and we do want to make sure everyone knows it's non-cancerous, so we're thrilled about that.
Yes.
You got the right thing done. Healing is happening. That's a very important thing, and I want to go into these lessons because there's so many of us that just find ourselves doing the same kinds of things, not only for physical pain, but for emotional pain, but career pain, a host of other things, relationship pain.
Mm-hmm.
And you laid out, as you always do, you are quick to observe and you are quick to name and then to talk about in an authentic way how we actually do this. And you listed out 5 things in terms of what we should do. So let's start going through those. You start with the one you first mentioned, and that is you actually have to notice it first. You at least have to be aware.
Right. And I think at some point there's things, whether it's professionally, mental health wise, physically, or in our relationships, where we don't notice it for a while until obviously there's something that shows up. For me, it was weird when I finally noticed it over a year ago and went into the doctor to address it. But I think I went into the doctor because I was dealing with something else, or I think I was taking a child at the time. And so it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to put me at the top of the list and address it. Because, I think when we do notice things, whether it's in areas of our mental health or relationships or professionally, we don't always want to notice it, or we don't always see it. I think it's when people around us that love us and are loving us enough to be honest with us. Sometimes it's others that will say, hey, I'm noticing this. I think we can notice it, or others can notice it, and hopefully you have people in your life that will tell you the truth. And then addressing it. We do want to ignore things at times. We all have long to-do lists, and there always seems to be a stewardship. I've talked on the show before about that principle that needs our attention. And in a number of my books, I talk about the glass ball and the rubber ball principle, that there's certain areas of our life that are glass balls on any given day, that if they drop, if you're a juggler, they will break. And the rubber balls of our lives, if they drop, they'll bounce. And what I lay out in a number of projects I've worked on is that if we ignore certain areas too long, the rubber balls become the glass ball. And so whether that's your health or your mental health or your financial health or relationships, if we're not, I'm not great at juggling per se, but I know people that are. I think at any given point, life will show us what is becoming a glass ball, whether it cracks or we start to feel the fragility in that area of our lives. And so addressing it sometimes becomes imperative because of that.
Yeah, and sometimes that ability to juggle prevents us from having the right conversation or actually noticing or addressing it. You talk about talking about it, which of course is crucial. Talk to me for a minute about number 4 you talked about, which was support it. What does that mean?
Well, and I think one of the best mental health tools I like to share with people, and I just shared it with my husband this morning as he messaged and said today just feels, like the to-do list and the overwhelm is taking over. I like to ask myself, what does support look like on any given day that can be different? And sometimes when an area of your life has gone on too long and has been ignored too long, you don't even know the answer to that question. You don't even know what support looks like. And so I would say just taking a minute each day and checking into the various stewardships of your life, the areas of your life that we're all responsible as humans to address, asking yourself what support looks like. For me, it was getting into the doctor, getting the information, and then at a certain point, I needed to talk about what was happening, and I did that and scheduled, it's time to now address it. And so I think it's talking to the right people, whether that's hiring someone and paying someone for their perspective because they're a professional in that given area, or it's talking to a close, trusted friend. And I am so grateful for the few friends in my life, you're on that list, where I know they're going to tell me the truth. I think we can sometimes fill our lives with a lot of people that tell us what we want to hear.
Right.
I think great leaders and effective people in our lives, and like you said, we all get really good at juggling at certain points. We all hit walls where it all comes crashing down. So asking yourself what support looks like and talking to the right individuals to help you in the next steps, which, is finally removing it if necessary. And whether that's a job change or a medical procedure or getting into a place where you have the support to step out of relationships that aren't serving you any longer, that's easy for a post on social media. The actual process of doing these 5 steps is a whole nother layer of vulnerability.
Yeah, and we call that the hard work and heavy lifting portion of the program.
Yeah.
It was so interesting in conjunction with the 24th of July holiday. I had a chance to sit down with Elder D. Todd Christofferson, an apostle in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we talked about this idea that for pioneers, they had this unique ability of if something was no longer helping them or moving their cause forward in their whatever their pioneering effort was, they had to remove it. They had to leave it at the side of the road. And sometimes it wasn't just leaving something that was no longer helpful or maybe it had become a burden, but they also had to just prioritize. And sometimes they had to leave some really nice, good stuff at the side of the road, whether it was, fine china or a piano or a rocking chair, or whatever it might be. And as I was going through your list, Gaina Lynn, I was thinking on that remove it. It's like, okay, what do I need to reprioritize? What do I need to leave at the side of the road? What do I just need to remove from my life so I have enough space to have that health, that energy, that focus, that confidence to move it all forward? And so as you've gone through this, obviously we're not happy you had the tumor. We are glad you got it removed. And we're really grateful for the principles because they apply in just so many different areas for us.
Well, side note, I loved seeing both you, Elder Christofferson, and you in the parade yesterday in the heat of the day. And I love that idea of what pioneers had to walk away from. I also recently posted about a job loss in my life and that process of creation that we all are a part of, where sometimes something dies not because of our choice, but because of extenuating circumstances. Sometimes that removal is forced upon us. I love to be more intentional in my life, and I try to be wise of what needs to be removed before it gets to the point. My kids felt like the tumor went on way too long. And I'm grateful I didn't wait much longer, because that pain of removal versus the pain of ignoring it, that percentage in our lives is sometimes where we decide, hey, you know what, the uncomfortable pain, the additional pain that's not necessary is calling to me at this point. The pain of having it removed and then the last week and a half of trying to repair and have my body go through the healing process hasn't been comfortable, but the pain of ignoring it had become more uncomfortable. And I think that same analogy can be applied to to whatever it is. And when you mentioned the pioneers, right, they didn't know what pain they were always going to have to walk through, but the cause was bigger, and that's what propelled them forward. And so they lived through that pain, knowing that hopefully what was awaiting them was better. I often say I wouldn't have made a great pioneer. I probably would have done fine until I made it to the valley. And then when I realized that I still had to build a house and plant crops, that's when I probably would have lost it, and sat down by the wayside and said, wait a minute, I did fine leaving the china and the piano. What do you mean I've got to build a house and plant crops now?
I'd still be out there looking for a Marriott somewhere along the way. But...
Exactly.
All right, we're going to do something really unique. We often talk about staying with the question a little bit longer. This time we're going to stay with the answerer. We're going to continue our conversation with Gaynell Lynn coming up after the break. Things we can learn from all faith and from no faith at all. Stick around. Fascinating conversation coming up right back here on KSL News Radio.
On the way home, 4,000 Utahns with student loans will get a break. Catch up on the day's biggest stories. Record-setting temperatures plague cities all over the country. Plus, traffic and weather every 10 minutes on the 9s. Get more from your drive with Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News. Weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
Here's something you've never heard before.
Stop. This is Simply Safe.
Introducing 24/7 Lifeguard Protection, only from Simply Safe Home Security. Now, monitoring agents can see and speak to intruders through our new indoor camera to help stop crime in real time and for fast police response. Get 20% off any new system with Fast Protect monitoring at simplysafe.com/radio. Advanced Home Security, 24/7 professional monitoring for less than $1 a day. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
At Consumer Cellular, you get the same exact coverage as the largest carriers for up to half the cost. Same thing, up to half the cost. Less money for the exact same thing. Hope this is clear enough. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, they're here to answer. Switch today and get a second month of service for free. Go to consumercellular.com/free month and enter promo code free month. Half the cost savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular's single line 5 gigabyte data plan and unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plans offered by T-Mobile and Verizon May 2023. Promotion subject to terms and conditions.
Men who have given up in their intimate life because of prostate issues, testicular cancer, or simply no ED treatments you've tried have worked. It's not the end. At Summit Men's Health, they have a customized approach for each individual patient to get results they desire and deserve. Stop wasting your time and money with treatments that don't work for most men, like Shockwave, Viagra, or the shots. Summit Men's Health guarantees results in your first visit, or you don't pay. Call Summit Men's Health today and get the spark back in your relationship. Summit Men's Health, 435-500-2790. They're so confident this will work for you, they promise if you don't get results on your first visit, they pay you $500 cash, no questions asked. Call Summit Men's Health today at 435-500-2790. That's 435-500-2790 to get the passion back in your love life.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, Utah's governor and attorney general are pressing TikTok to respond to subpoenas about its business operations and the possible harmful effects on Utah's young people. Second, an explosion at Thatcher Chemical left 2 men injured in Salt Lake City this morning. Third, a man and a woman in Las Vegas were indicted in an alleged case of extreme child abuse. Right now, 91 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, we're not going to stay with the same question, but we are going to continue the conversation with our guest, Gaynell Lynn Condie. Of course, she's a prominent voice here in the state of Utah and around the world. She's a speaker, an author, podcaster, and just an extraordinary thinker, and helps all of us get into different places and spaces that maybe we would skip across if we didn't stop and really engage and think. And one of the things that Gaylin has been involved with over the years is just engaging in a curious, important kind of conversation with people of different faiths and people of no faiths, for that matter. And so what we wanted to look at today is, what do we learn? What do we learn by talking with people who think different, believe different, live different than we do? And then how do we all grow when we engage in conversations like that? And so, Gaylin, I want to jump into some of the things that you pointed out on your social media channels this week in terms of things that we can do. I always talk about it in terms of holy envy, and I have holy envy for a whole lot of folks in all kinds of different faith traditions. But give us a couple that really have been important to you in terms of how do we value that, how do we see the beauty in that, and how do we gain from that?
So I am so grateful for the conversations you have on the air in that space of interfaith. And I have that same holy envy sometimes that you're on air with people that I feel so much better about how I see the world because I hear how they see the world. I grew up in a community that was very interfaith, diverse. The wide diversity of my social structure from those teenage years, I was often the token member of my faith in my circles of friends. And for that, I feel so grateful because they would reflect back to me how they saw how I saw the world. And because of that, I have continued to try to raise my kids in a community where there was a predominant faith, that with this lens, that don't assume that you know anything about someone because you see them in your congregation on Sunday, and don't assume you know something about someone if you don't see them there. Yeah. And that kind of curiosity, I hope my children have carried that out into the world as they've gone out and become adults and had conversations with people. But first and foremost, I've had the opportunity to host for the last 4 seasons a show from a specific lens of my faith. And that show, unfortunately, is ending, but the last episode just dropped on Friday, and I thought it was interesting that both my co-host and I, kind of where we started is where we ended. And where I ended was that specifically what I've learned from certain individuals of other faiths. One, I've learned from my Muslim brothers and sisters a greater sense of praying and fasting, which within my faith I do, but because of travels and opportunities to be in Muslim countries, I've seen it at a heightened level. Yeah. And it caused me to see the power of that maybe I did more as a habit at times if I'm not careful. And when I watch others, especially within the Muslim community, do it at a different level, I'm changed. My Catholic friends have taught me so much about sacrifice. Recently, our family was in D.C. for the 4th of July, and on the way home, I posted about meeting a new friend, which my family sometimes doesn't love traveling with me because I'll talk to the stranger for so long. But it was a young girl that was close to the age of my children, and she's 2 years away from taking her final vows as a Catholic nun. And she's changed her name. She's moved away. She taught me so much about devotion as we stood there in this airport and talked about what devotion looks like for her. I could go on and on, but I think that you and I both share this love of having interfaith conversations, because when we talk to people of other faiths and we see how they keep their faith, it changes how we can keep our faith. And sometimes that difference scares us. Yeah. That's where I find my greatest sources of divinity, when I see the diversity around me.
Yeah, and that's such an important component to all of that. When we, the world and society and politics all want us to see every difference as a reason for division, as opposed to being able to see the dignity and even the divinity in those differences, I think is so vital. And I had something recently with Jonathan Rauch, who is an atheist, that really made me rethink a lot of our conversations around faith in this country. As an atheist, I think he delivered the greatest case ever for the need for faith in a democracy or in a constitutional republic. That there are just things that can't be done through government, no matter how accurate or good or in good intentions it may be. Things that just need to happen in families, in homes, in neighborhoods, community, congregations, all of those kinds of things. And so I think that's a vital part of all of this. One of the things that you pointed out, Galen, that I wanted to get to, actually two, I want to sneak in before we get to the top of the hour. So one is just this idea of just noticing the beautiful. How do we get to that holy envy space? And then how do we do that? You also said when we rest, that's also a space where faith can grow and where we can actually learn that from maybe someone who practices their faith a little bit different.
So I was having a conversation with my daughter who's serving an 18-month mission for our faith, and we were talking about faith and that fear of sometimes praying to God and asking for our faith to increase. Not sure if God's going to teach us that through some hard stuff.
Right.
And so I invited her to consider how we can see our faith growing in the simple, in the beautiful, and the miraculous. And I love having interfaith conversations because I think that's where I see the beauty of faith. And I love that you mentioned our friends that are atheists and maybe faith isn't part of their journey. But we live in a society that doesn't always celebrate keeping faith and being devoted and practicing our worship practices in the individual ways we do that. And so I was sharing with my daughter, can we see faith in the fact that I could DoorDash her donuts? And I know that sounds like a simple thing, but the mothers out there will understand. My son served a 2-year mission for our church in Africa where I couldn't DoorDash him. And so yesterday when I was able to do that, I saw God in that. And sometimes we want to see God in these big, massive strokes of miraculous experiences. And yet, when I bring it down to the simple, the everyday, for me, that's where I find God. And when I talk to my friends of other faiths and they reflect back to me how they see God, I have a friend that attends the Calvary Baptist Church here locally in Utah, and she's so much my resource when I need something prayed for because she prays in this really beautiful, specific way. To me, I see God in that. My friend Pastor Logan says sometimes we try to make our interfaith conversations about what we share that's the same. And I think that's our human nature to want to feel comfortable when we see the similarities between us. But he pointed out to me there's beauty in seeing our differences, that there's something that our Jewish friends can teach us about their faith and the sacrifice and trauma that group has come from that's different than maybe what I come from. And so instead of quickly wanting to go to our sameness, what if we leaned into our differences? And I think that's where God sees us, and he approaches each of us differently. He knows that for me as a mom and for my daughter, it's showing up in donuts being DoorDashed and not necessarily in celebrating Sabbath on a Friday, right? And that we can see the differences in that.
Yeah, so important. Crucial conversations to be sure, and we all have so much to learn from one another, and staying curious, asking questions, listening, looking for the beautiful, resting, praying, meditating. All of those things have an interconnectedness to it that I think strengthens our home, strengthens our neighborhood, our community, and well beyond. Galen Condi, thank you so much for joining us today. And that wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top of the hour news. Hour number 2 coming up next. Stick around.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour. There have been calls for the Utah Republicans who are endorsing Ron DeSantis for president to denounce some of the comments he made, explaining a Florida education standard that teaches that slaves benefited from learning trades. Republican Senator Todd Weiler helped to organize the event.
I agree he didn't denounce it. I also didn't hear him say that slavery was just a job training program. And I think that opportunists are trying to put words in his mouth.
Democrats say DeSantis' explanation of the policy minimizes the loss of human dignity and liberty that enslaved people endured. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. UPS has reached an agreement that will likely keep its 300,000 drivers from going on strike at the end of the month. Professor Seth Harris from Northeastern University told KSL News Radio's Inside Sources it's an example of a big company taking care of business.
We saw a company that was willing to sit down, obey the law, deal with its union, scream at its union, fight with its union, and ultimately come to a deal with its union.
Teamsters union members still have to vote on the new contract before it takes effect. Taking a look at your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 26 points on the day so far. The NASDAQ up 85. The S&P right now 12 points higher than it started the day. And our KSL weather, just sizzling forecast ahead. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
If you're hiring, it can feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. Like Marco, President of Operations at Telly Tires and Auto Centers.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs to fill.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Now try ZipRecruiter free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/FREE.
With the economy the way it is, you're probably staying put. So invest in your home, your number one asset, with beautiful custom replacement windows from Advanced Window Products. They're a local Utah company building beautiful vinyl framed and insulated double pane windows for 37 years right here in Salt Lake City. Advanced Window Products will save you money on your energy bill. Get security features to keep your family safe. And at Advanced Window Products, it's all custom. And the best part, they're local. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. So there's no middleman markup. You save on the highest quality windows in Utah. Plus, Rocky Mountain and Dominion offer rebates. For a limited time, they offer 60-month 0% financing. And right now, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more. They're working 8 weeks out. So make the call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Mount Star Healthcare's Harriman Emergency Center is now open. Be seen fast at the Harriman ER, located just off Mountain View Corridor and 134th South in Harriman.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
A new accident in Utah County, northbound I-15 at University Parkway in Orem, but it's already been moved out of traffic to the shoulder. Fed Up Kitchen's newest meal prep location is open at 2440 South Main Street in Woods Cross. Use code FOUNDING50 for 20% off your first order or 10% off for a year. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, it looks like we're going to see sunshine and very hot temperatures going forward. Temps up to 103 on Saturday, and looking for, again, another stretch of hot weather. Right now, 92 degrees and sunny at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
This may not have been on your headline today, but the Biden administration is considering tariffs on tin plate steel, which is used for canned goods. They say this would boost jobs, help the working class, and hurt China. Beyond the headline, the reality, such tariffs might do something very different, maybe even opposite, may cost jobs, raise prices, and potentially hurt some of our allies abroad. So to find out, all you have to do is look at the 2018 tariffs put in place by then-President Donald Trump. So beyond headlines, let's dig into what the impact is. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
We're really pleased to have back on the program Catherine Rampell, opinion columnist at the Washington Post and an economic and political commentator for CNN. Great piece, as always, Catherine, talking about the government once again threatened job in the name of boosting employment. As I said, not a lot of people woke up this morning thinking about tin plate steel or how it might impact their world. So help us all understand that. What is this, and what is the potential impact?
Sure thing. So to clarify, we already have a lot of tariffs on various kinds of steel and aluminum, some of them put in place by Trump, some of them put in place by prior presidents. This is for a subset of steel that basically gets used for tin cans. Think things like Campbell's soup or Bush beans or, cans of tuna, cans of veggies, all sorts of other things like that. And the reason why this is being considered now is that one of the few remaining U.S. companies that still makes this product, and there aren't that many left, in part because there are many more profitable kinds of steel that American companies are more likely to specialize in. One of the few remaining companies and a labor union that represents workers at that company have basically filed a complaint with the Commerce Department and the International Trade Commission, arguing that they are being hurt by cheaper steel from other countries. And most of that steel, by the way, most of that tin, the tin plate, is coming from friendly nations. So think Canada, Germany, et cetera. There's some that comes from China, but for the most part, it is what we would generally consider allies who are sending it to us, and we're buying it. And sure thing, seems reasonable. If you are in this industry and other countries are making a less expensive version of the same product, including these other countries with pretty high labor and environmental standards, then that's not good for your employment. However, you think about the bigger picture, and there are a lot more people whose jobs are dependent on purchasing, on their companies being able to purchase tin, than there are people who actually work in the production of it. So it sounds like maybe you're helping the people in this sector, the tin mills, essentially, but all of those downstream workers, and again, there are many, many more of them. Like there are about 30 times as many people whose jobs are dependent on purchasing tin plate. People who, including many unionized workers, by the way, people who work in, Campbell soup factories. A lot of those jobs are unionized. Their jobs would be put at risk if you made the tin inputs more expensive. So, it's complicated. It's like I understand why the people whose jobs are directly hurt by this are unhappy, or their employers, but there's a much larger universe of American workers who would be hurt. Not to mention the fact that, for example, canned goods are disproportionately bought by low-income people, right? Like there are, people of all income levels buy canned soup and buy canned beans, but if you are lower income, you're more likely to be purchasing those kinds of things as opposed to fresh produce.
Yeah.
So if you make these products more expensive, it disproportionately hurts them too.
Yeah, and it is one of those examples, and you point this out throughout the piece beautifully. You go through the example of the Trump era tariffs and kind of how those played out. Again, sounds nice. It's a great talking point, great bumper sticker, great if you're speaking to the Steelworkers Conference or whatever. But the result often ends up impacting negatively those that you say you're really there to help. I wanted to dig in on a couple of things, Catherine, that you pointed out. That again, we always talk about think again. Headline: the president can focus on China. This is going to hurt China and help American workers. That's a good framing for the president. And yet you get beyond that headline. Even with the international front, China's not really the one that's going to be impacted the most by this. It seems that those who will be impacted are those that are pretty important allies to us.
Right. Even if your goal is to, hone in on China, on Chinese goods, again, we have already placed so many prior rounds of tariffs on Chinese-made steel that products from that country of origin, from China, have basically been blocked out of the market. I mean, not officially, but
Right.
de facto, because they are tariffed so heavily that it is not competitive for Chinese steelmakers to sell a lot of their products here, which is why you see that larger shares in the market are occupied. It depends on which individual steel product we're talking about, but in general, we import a lot of steel from the EU, from China, from South Korea, from Canada, and so when Trump imposed those tariffs in 2018, he portrayed them as being about China, but in fact, because China occupied such a small share of our market already, who was bearing the brunt of these additional taxes, finding their products become more expensive, I should say, because of the tariffs. They were that universe of allied countries, whom we were separately proclaiming we wanted to, join in our battle to fight back against China economically in any event, or to write the rules of the road so that that the rules of trade more closely aligned with our values rather than China's values. We wanted Japan, we wanted the EU, we wanted Canada and Mexico and all these other places to join in a sort of an alliance with us, and instead we alienated them because again they were bearing the brunt of the tariffs, not China, and the cost of so basically. It drove up the price of steel. And again, as with tin, the broader universe of steel purchasers is much larger than the much smaller subset of steel makers in the United States. And as a result, when those tariffs were introduced, I think there were something like 80 times as many jobs that were dependent on steel, purchasing steel as an input, as a component, as there were jobs in the steelmaking industry. So think things, if you worked at an auto plant, if you worked at a household appliance factory, making washing machines or dishwashers, refrigerators, et cetera, or many, many other kinds of firms that, again, purchase steel as an input, they were hurt by the fact that we put these tariffs in place. They were hurt, American consumers were hurt, and of course allied countries, because they all, to some extent, bore some of the burden that comes from raising taxes on this product.
Great insight as always. Catherine Rampell, opinion columnist at The Washington Post, economic and political commentator for CNN. And I love the way you couch that. They sound good on the front end, as you pointed out in your piece in The Washington Post. The collateral damage of workers, consumers, diplomatic relationships, all on the docket, are all really challenging. Catherine, thank you as always for joining us.
Thank you.
Really important stuff there from Catherine Rampell, and it always sounds good on the front end, but often these things that we say are going to help end up hurting the very people that we're declaring we're going to help. And this is one of those cases. These kinds of tariffs, collateral damage is usually on the workers, definitely on the consumers, if you're buying soup or tuna or any of those kinds of things, and then the diplomatic relations with some of our key allies who will get hurt the most. China will not be hurt the most in this at all. And while I know you didn't wake up thinking about tin this morning and that kind of steel, it is going to have an impact on all of us if all of this moves through from the Biden administration. So, again, you got to think about it, and then you got to think again, what is the net result? What's the downstream? What are the unintended consequences in the end? We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
Did you miss the movie show last Friday where we talked about Barbie and Oppenheimer, also known as Barbenheimer?
It's supposed to be Up and Barbie.
Plus a new movie from the original Studio C cast in their first feature-length comedy. Go to KSLPodcast.com, get to the movie show page, and listen to the show and see what we thought of it.
That's KSLPodcasts.com.
For adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy, now there's Skyrizi, Risankizumab Rizza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieve 90% clear skin at 4 months, and Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Nothing and me go hand in hand. Nothing on my skin, that's my new place. Nothing is everyday.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
With Skyrizi, you could achieve 90% clearer skin. Ask your doctor about the #1 dermatologist prescribed biologic in psoriasis and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKYRIZI to learn more.
Back in the day, a shoemaker was called a cobbler because the stone you walked on was called cobblestone. Or was it the other way around? But before you can walk on cobblestone, you have to lay it down. Of course, you can also use cobblestone in your garden or park strips, or, well, you get the idea. But where do you get good old-fashioned cobblestone? The dirt bag. Imagine the things you can do with it in your yard and garden. If you have an imagination, the dirt bag has what you need to bring that dream to life. Rock mulch? How about 11 different rock mulches? Playground chips for the kids? Yep, the dirt bag. For topsoil, sod, bark mulches, and pathway material called chat, the dirt bag. And with a dirt bag, your garden and yard you have in your imagination can be delivered right to your driveway. Or you can pick it up in bulk yourself. There's a reason everyone loves the dirt bag. Find out what the dirt bag can do for you at thedirtbag.com. Thedirtbag.com.
You were supposed to get a colonoscopy, but stuff came up.
Well, we did have to pick up the twins from practice.
You said you'd get it taken care of, but stuff.
But then we had to go across town to get my father-in-law.
And grab dinner.
But if you were 45 and older, it's time to get checked. It's the best way to prevent colon cancer, and there are multiple screening options available.
But then...
Don't let stuff get in the way of your screening. Visit the Colorectal Cancer Alliance at ccalliance.org or call 877-422-2030.
Hey, this is Chris with JCW's. Craving something sweet? We do ice cream right. Come in and try one of our shakes, freezes, or an ice cream cone, and you'll see why we say JCW's, quality, and a lot of it.
Do you know why more homeowners choose Any Hour Services for help when it's time to replace their air conditioners? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and the main reasons people choose Any Hour Services is because of our people, processes, and convenience. People tell us all the time that there's just something different about having an Any Hour Services technician in their home. That's why most of our over 18,000 Google reviews mention our technicians by name. Another reason is our 7-step install process that we call the Any Hour Difference. It all starts with the needs analysis, where you explain what you like and dislike about your current system. This helps us design and size a system that fits your comfort and efficiency preferences as well as your home's airflow requirements. As for convenience, most of our installs are completed in one day. We also have flexible, no money down financing options available, even if you've been told no in the past. So if you've been thinking about getting a new air conditioner, call Any Hour Services and schedule a free estimate today. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the man caught on camera during a road rage incident involving 4 teens has been arrested. Second, officials warn of algae blooms in bodies of water that could make you or your pets sick. And third, UPS has reached an agreement with the Teamsters Union, averting a strike with its 300,000 drivers. Right now, 92 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson. And as we round out the month of July, very important to note that this is the last week that members of Congress will be in our nation's capital. Next week, they will all leave town for what is termed the very long August recess. And I will note, before I complain a little bit about the recess is really not just a vacation period for members of Congress. Most members of Congress across the political spectrum will usually take their family vacation, which they should surely have, And then they tend to spend the rest of the month traveling around their states or around their districts, having meetings, interacting with constituents, hosting town halls and events. And so we talk about it in terms of August recess, but that really is a little bit of a misnomer in terms of what it really is. Yes, they will get a family vacation, and they all should. Everyone from the president on down ought to get a little vacation. That's a good thing. And then they will do a lot of work around the state and around the district. So that's important to keep in mind. Now, perspective-wise, as we look at this last week, that they're all going to be in Washington, D.C., the House will be gone until September the 12th, so they'll actually be a full week past Labor Day. The Senate returns on September the 5th. Now, why am I giving you those dates? Those dates are very, very important because that will determine how much time is left for Congress to actually do their job, their most important job, one of the few jobs that is outlined in the Constitution, and that is funding the government, which they have to do by September the 30th. Remember, the nation, the government, runs on a fiscal calendar that ends at the end of September. So that means by September 30th at midnight, they have to have spending ready, or then you get to that government shutdown word. And we're not going to have that. But how we get there is what I want you to watch. Because if they don't do anything, we'll end up in a place we have been far too many times before, and that is at very late at night on September the 30th, some awful continuing resolution will be slapped together, voted on without being read, and will continue to spend in ways that are not responsible or sustainable. And so how is this supposed to work? It's really simple. There are 12 appropriations bills that are to be passed in the House and the Senate and sent to the president to sign. That's how you fund the government. The problem has been for decades now that Congress fails to do its job. And so they just either keep spending on autopilot. That's what a continuing resolution does. It just keeps spending at current levels and you just keep trucking along. Or there's some big omnibus bill that usually adds more spending, not prioritized spending, not focused spending, not accountable spending, just more spending. So we have these 12 appropriations bills that are all to be done by September the 30th. So if you start doing the math on that, the numbers are pretty small between the recess period and the 30th of September, especially if the House doesn't come back until the 12th of September. So what's going to happen this week as it relates to this? Well, Republican leadership in the House is going to bring 2 out of those 12 appropriations bills to the floor this week for a vote. That's a good thing. The 2 that are scheduled for this week are the Department of Veteran Affairs and a military construction bill. That's kind of all rolled into one component. And then the Agricultural Rural Development and the Food and Drug Administration bill. So those are the 2 that are coming this week. And that's important. Obviously, military construction, Veterans Affairs, all of those things are vital. And there's going to be some interesting debates over what is in and what shouldn't be in those particular bills. And then the second one, in terms of agriculture, rural development, those are some really challenging ones to navigate as well. Currently, Democrats in the House are whipping against the passage of both of those bills, again, for various reasons. And they should have this debate, let people offer amendments, and do that. But they ought to do it today. They ought to get moving on it so it gets done before they leave. Because if you do the math, that's 2 out of 12. That leaves them 10 appropriations bills that need to be done before the end of September. So if we don't get around to actually doing the job, then we just continue to get what we've been getting. And the problem with what we've been getting is it continues to drive us deeper and deeper into debt. We're well over $31 trillion in debt as a country. We're continuing to spend more than we bring in every year, which is getting to be really difficult because record revenue. The IRS is bringing it in. There's more money than ever before is being collected in taxes, more than ever in the history of our country. So it's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. But if we do these bills in such a haphazard way, if we don't do them in the right sequence, cadence, and processing, then we end up, once again, at the fake fight and the false choice. And so I'm laying this out today at the end of July so that you know what to watch for this week, but more importantly, you know what we're up against and what we're likely to see once we get past Labor Day. When everybody comes back into session, it will be full-scale panic. Everything will be political. Everything will be about a potential government shutdown and what that's going to mean to push grandma off the cliff or to not fund something for someone in poverty or to not take care of our veterans. And all of the scare tactics, all of the anger, fear, frustration kind of stuff is going to come out of the woodwork in a very big way, especially because we're moving into the 2024 election cycle. And the 2024 election cycle really kicks off in earnest after Labor Day. Everything leading up to that is just a lot of overture, a lot of pre-testing of messages, and then the rubber's really going to hit the road after Labor Day. And so what happens with these bills really matters, and how we choose to fund the government really matters. And the question is, will Congress do its job? Because I continue to not just have a hope, it just works. If Congress does its job, there should never, ever, 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 ever be a threat of a government shutdown. We all get exasperated by that. We all get frustrated with that. And some of us just get downright concerned because we do have worries. Well, what if it does shut down? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my grandmother, my grandfather? But the problem is we shouldn't have to worry about that ever. Ever in the history of ever should we have to worry about a government shutdown. And the answer is as simple as it gets. Congress needs to do their job. So I applaud that they're taking up 2 of the 12 appropriations bills to fund the government this week. That's good. And we should watch how that plays out. We should see what amendments are allowed to be offered from both the Democrats and the Republicans. And we should see what the spending actually looks like. And then when they come back after Labor Day, they're going to have a host of things that they're really going to have to get done. Health and Human Services, commerce, justice, labor, all of those are going to have to be dealt with in a very, very short window. And so will they get the job done? Will they do the work the right way? Will they follow the process? There are people on both sides of the aisle who claim to be devoted to the document that gives them the process for funding the government. And yet, we seem to end up every year at one more shutdown showdown, threat of a catastrophe, and sky is falling. And so once again, I'm going to tell you to put the panic button aside, but we should look at how we get to the end of this. Because if Congress cannot get the job done in the right process, if the only way they get things done is through a backroom deal at 11:59 on September the 30th, that's bad for you. That's bad for the country. It's not good for anybody, except for maybe the politicians and the industrial complex of the left and the right that will use this to raise a whole lot of money. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to look at some coalitions that are developing. Fascinating conversation coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour: the victim of a terrifying road rage incident in Utah County over the weekend, speaking out now about that encounter. 4 friends on their way to dinner say a car followed them on I-15 to Springville, where video shows the driver getting out and punching the window.
Oh my gosh! I think he was saying, like, get out of the car and, like, swearing.
One victim, whose name we won't share for their safety, spoke with KSL TV. Utah Highway Patrol says they've arrested the driver, 28-year-old Skylar Johnston. And they say he had a meth pipe in his car as well as an open container of alcohol. Lori Vallow Daybell's defense attorneys are reportedly saying Tammy Daybell's aunt doesn't have the right to speak at Vallow Daybell's sentencing hearing next week. Vallow Daybell was convicted of killing her 2 children. and of conspiracy to kill Tammy Daybell, her husband's late wife. Her lawyers argue the aunt is not an immediate family member, and there's a hearing on the issue scheduled for tomorrow morning. Our top national story at this hour. The 18-year-old son of basketball star LeBron James, Bronny James, suffered a cardiac arrest during a basketball practice Monday at the University of Southern California. He was rushed to the hospital, and ABC News medical contributor Alok Patel says everyone, regardless of their physical skills and athleticism, should look into their own risks of a major cardiac event.
This is relatively rare, but again, we do see a few cases every year. I've seen some studies estimating that it's about 1 out of 80,000 athletes. But these stories are extremely scary, and they are important to talk to your doctors about if you have any particular concerns, if you have a family history.
Bronny James remains hospitalized in stable condition, according to his family. Your money at this moment, at the close of trading, the Dow Jones average was up 26 points on the day. The NASDAQ up 85. The S&P 500 was up about 12. And our KSL weather, just sizzling hot weather as far as we can see. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink & McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. It's no secret that mortgage rates have risen from historic lows over the last few years. In some cases, having a low mortgage rate can also act as so-called golden handcuffs when homeowners don't want to refinance and lose their rate. One solution to this is a home equity line of credit, or HELOC. HELOCs have higher rate than first mortgages, but they offer flexibility as they are a credit line that can be tapped into as needed. This is a way to take care of financial matters such as debt consolidation, home improvements, medical or college bills, or whatever without losing your current mortgage rate. And when rates come back down, you can refi and take out the HELOC. Call us if this is something you'd like to explore. Fink & McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com. NMLS 289115.
Looking for a trusted oral surgery practice? Look no further than Aspire Surgical. With a team of highly skilled and experienced board-certified oral and facial surgeons, Aspire Surgical offers a variety of surgical services, from wisdom teeth removal to dental implants to facial cosmetics. At Aspire Surgical, patient comfort and safety are top priorities. Their state-of-the-art facilities and advanced techniques ensure that patients receive the best possible care in a comfortable and safe environment. Visit their website at aspiresurgical.net or call 385-474-4952 to schedule a consultation today. Trust Aspire Surgical for all your oral surgery needs. Visit aspiresurgical.net or call 385-474-4952 to schedule a consultation today. Aspire Surgical, where your aspirations become a reality.
Join Mike Stevens of Capital Wealth Advisors for Retire Right Radio, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. That's Retire Right Radio with Mike Stevens, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificate. Here's Ricky Meese.
It is a delay-free drive on all the Valley freeways, but we do have the final cleanup of the crash in Orem for northbounders on I-15 in Utah County, reported near University Parkway, out of traffic on the shoulder. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we've got sunshine today and looking at the same thing for the next several days. But our weather will be hot with temperatures close to 100 every day in the coming week and up to 103 by the weekend. Right now, 93 degrees and sunny at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Really pleased to have joining us on the program Daniel Cox, the director of the Survey Center on American Life and a senior fellow in polling and public opinion at the American Enterprise Institute. And Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
So you've been looking at some really interesting data, part of it in terms of looking at coalitions, some real traditional divisions that we see in the country, but also just some of the pessimistic versus optimistic view of where we are and where we go. And so let's dive right in. And I want to start with some of the things you pointed out in terms of the optimism, pessimism. What are we actually seeing there as a country?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things that we see in the data is that Americans overall are more optimistic or pessimistic when they're thinking about the future of the country. And I think that feeling isn't always reflected in a lot of the public debates that we're having and a lot of the national news media coverage of politics and the way things are going in the U.S. But if you look at what Americans actually think and how they feel pretty good. Now, there are some important differences. So if you look at race, for instance, Black and Hispanic Americans are actually among the most optimistic about the future of the country and the direction it's headed.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting as you went through that breakdown. 63% of Black Americans were very optimistic, 57% of Asian Americans, 55% of Hispanics all have that optimism. And so as you look at that and continue to break those numbers down, what else do you see, again, even amongst the division, which is usually the red-blue division, Democrats and Republicans, does it tend to evolve there as well?
Yeah, so, we do see some political divisions as well. We see some, for instance, older Americans are slightly more optimistic about the future of the United States than younger Americans, which is not surprising because I think one of the reasons you see some of these differences in how people view the future is an understanding of past. So like having a longer lens and understanding America as kind of a work in progress that we've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas. And so you're not responding to in a particular political environment or the particular president in office. You're thinking sort of a broader sweep about where the country's been and where it's going.
Yeah, and let's get into that. I thought one of the really interesting components that you dug into was just looking at the kind of the American dream model in terms of who feels like they've already achieved it and who's real confident that they will achieve it in their lifetime.
Yeah, so this is something else that's really interesting. So we asked this question about whether Americans think that they've already reached the American dream, whether they're on their way, or whether they think that they won't reach it in their lifetime. Most Americans are somewhat positive about whether they're going to fulfill the American dream. And we didn't find that exactly, so it might mean somewhat different things for different people. But for the most part, Americans believe that they have either achieved it already, and this is particularly true for older Americans, and it's not surprisingly because financial stability and security are a big important component of achieving the American dream. But even young folks, if you look at what they think they will be able to achieve it or not, most of them are either saying they have achieved it or will achieve it in their lifetime.
Yeah, obviously it has an impact on what we'll be watching and hearing and seeing as we roll into the 2024 election cycle. You also dove into how some of these attitudes, not just positive, negative, and not just the future of the American dream, but even some of the particulars in terms of issues, whether it's jobs or climate change, the environment, healthcare, and so on. But I want to get to this idea of coalitions. You did some really interesting groupings in terms of these coalitions and what that might mean in terms of the 2024. And so let's start on the Democratic side of the aisle on that one in terms of where is President Biden and what does his coalition look like? What coalitions does he need to come along?
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things, and I think it's been really undercovered in the national news media, is how Biden is actually doing really well among older voters who have consistently, in the last couple of presidential elections, leaned right and more like support Republican candidates. But he's actually faring well with that group despite those kind of conservative voting tendencies. And he's struggling with younger voters. And that's a group that has become much more progressive over recent years. And I think since basically 2004, at least 6 in 10 young voters have supported Democratic candidates. And I think he'll probably do okay with them. But it's a really significant shift. It's almost like an inverse of what we've seen in some recent presidential elections where older voters are supporting Republicans and younger voters supporting Democrats. But we see Biden is struggling a bit with what should be a pretty natural Democratic constituency. And I don't think, if Trump's the nominee, he may fare as well with older voters as we might think.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And then on the Republican side, of course, it's a crowded field currently with the former president polling-wise, again, not necessarily delegate and organization-wise in terms of what's going on the ground and getting those delegates. But you went through some things I thought were really fascinating in terms of the kinds of coalitions, again, how things are kind of grouping and coming, and what that might mean in terms of how candidates try to position themselves, especially rolling into the fall.
Yeah, so this is really interesting, and there's a couple of things that are worth highlighting. First and foremost, and this has been true since Trump first arrived on the scene back in 2015, is that there's been a really significant education gap in his support. So Trump does much, much better among Republican and more conservative voters without a college degree. And he really struggles with college-educated voters, both in the general election but also in the Republican primary. DeSantis generally does far better than Trump among folks who have more formal years of education. And then again, that's been true basically from the get-go. Trump supporters are also less affluent and less politically active as well. And so that's one of the things that people have been talking about. Well, if Trump's not the nominee, will these irregular voters who are really more Trump voters than GOP voters, will they stay home? And I think it's a real possibility because some of those folks, they're not as committed to the GOP as they are to Trump. The other thing is there's a significant marriage gap as well. So DeSantis voters are much more likely to be married. And again, that's obviously correlated with higher education and greater affluence. So those things are all moving together. But it is a really distinctive picture when you look at the coalitions of the two leading candidates.
Yeah, I think all of that is, and there's so many subsets of that. I think in terms of how that breaks down and what that really means moving forward. So as you look at it at this stage of it all, what do you see as kind of the next thing that might either tip toward President Biden thinks he's got to strengthen or do, or again what the numbers are telling you in terms of the Republican side? Are there any really natural paths or progressions again according to the data?
Well, when it comes to Biden, I think one bellwether group that it's really worth paying attention to are Hispanic voters. And obviously there's a tremendous amount of diversity among Hispanic voters by region and state, by nationality, by religion. But it's really been clear that the Democratic Party is struggling with Hispanic voters in recent elections. It used to be a pretty consistent Democratic voting group, and that's shifted somewhat in recent elections, and now it's much more competitive. And so depending on who the nominee is, that's going to be a really important group. The other thing that your listeners might be interested in is that I'm doing some research now that suggests that Trump is going to really struggle with Latter-day Saint voters. So in some new analysis that I'm running right now that'll release this week, we found that more than half of Latter-day Saints have a negative opinion of Trump, and actually that DeSantis does much better among those voters than Trump does. So, it's not the largest group, but there are sizable numbers in places like Arizona and Nevada, which will be competitive. And so that is another group that I think is really going to be important, both in the primary but also in the general election.
Yeah, great insight as always, and we'll watch for that coming out on Thursday for some additional perspective on all of that. And again, I think this whole thing is so interesting, especially in the context of the American dream and just that view of what comes next for the country. Great data, great insight and analysis as always. Daniel Cox is the director of the Survey Center on American Life and a senior fellow in polling and public opinion at the American Enterprise Institute. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
Great perspective there. And we're going to stick with that theme just a little bit in terms of optimism and pessimism in the country. How do we avoid cynicism? And how do we actually fulfill that dream, that hope of what is the American dream? We'll talk about that coming up next. Stick around.
In Box Elder County, they're all about the bucket list. Want to go birding at the premier birding destination in the western United States? Well, check off the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. How about land art? The spiral jetty and sun tunnels will leave you inspired. Or stand on the spot where the Union and Central Pacific Railroads joined and forged the destiny of a nation. Yep, Golden Spike National Historical Park is like no other place. Check. Splash, boat, camp, or fish your day away? Willard Bay State Park will guarantee a good time. Soak in a natural hot spring with the highest mineral content in the world? That would be Crystal Hot Springs. You'll feel rejuvenated. Eat at Utah's original steakhouse. Maddox Ranch House is perfection. Check. A 1920s diner. The Idle Owl Cafe will transport you back in time. As you empty your Box Elder County bucket list, you'll find a whole new set of adventures to fill it up again. Fill up your bucket list at visitboxeldercounty.com.
I can't wait for what's next. Even with higher stroke risk due to atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat not caused by a heart valve problem. Eliquis, apixaban tablets, reduces stroke risk. It's the #1 cardiologist-prescribed blood thinner.
Don't stop taking prescription Eliquis without talking to your doctor, as this may increase your risk of stroke. Eliquis can cause serious and, in rare cases, fatal bleeding. Don't take Eliquis if you have an artificial heart valve, abnormal bleeding, or have antiphospholipid syndrome. While taking, you may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. A spinal injection while on Eliquis increases risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis, the inability to move. Get medical help right away for unexpected bleeding or unusual bruising, or if you have tingling, numbness, or muscle weakness. It may increase your bleeding risk if you take medicines such as aspirin products, NSAIDs, SSRIs, SNRIs, and blood thinners. Tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures. Learn more at Eliquis.com or call 1-855-ELIQUIS.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Maximize your energy savings with a new energy-efficient heating and cooling system from Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric today. Get up to $1,750 back and a free Nest thermostat when Yes buys back your old inefficient HVAC system. Proudly serving Utah for more than 45 years. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. It drove me crazy. It got so bad, I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't concentrate. I absolutely refused to let any of my friends come to our house for any reason. I would have been humiliated if anyone found out how much my dad drank and how loud my mom screamed at him. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful. The only thing that happened is my mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. Her relationship with my dad really changed. I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I wanted to see if I could have a better relationship with my dad. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-AL-ANON or go to alanon.org.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Question: what will you find on all over-the-counter or OTC medicine packages to help you choose the right drug and use it safely? The answer: the Drug Facts label. This label lists the medicine's active ingredients and purpose, how much to take, and warnings you should know before using it. Remember, even OTC medicines you buy without a prescription can cause side effects you don't want. So follow the information listed on the Drug Facts label. For more information, visit fda.gov/drugfacts label. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Most of us like to be out in the sun. That's why sunscreen and other safety measures are key to protecting your skin from aging and cancer. The FDA recommends using a sunscreen with an SPF of 15 or higher. Also, look for broad spectrum on the label. That means both harmful ultraviolet A and B rays are blocked. Remember, SPF plus broad spectrum equal healthy fun in the sun. Visit www.fda.gov/sunscreen for more information. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me. And believe it or not, they really do make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for talking and preparing me for what's ahead.
Thank you for talking.
For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
The following is a test of the emergency alert system.
This is a test of the emergency alert system. If this had been an actual emergency, official messages would have followed this alert tone.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, I actually want to go back to a little bit of the conversation we just wrapped up with Dan Cox. Some of the really incredible information and data coming out in terms of some perspectives of the American people. And one of the things that he honed in on specifically was this idea of American optimism versus American pessimism. So currently, 48% of Americans say they are somewhat or very optimistic about the future of the country. It's also interesting to look at that along demographic lines, which can be pretty stark and pretty interesting. Looking at Black Americans, 63% of Black Americans are very optimistic about the country's future. 57% of Asian Americans, 55% of Hispanics are also very optimistic about the future of the country. We also got into the idea of the individual version of the American dream. And some feel that they've already obtained it, and some are confident, a good 40% feel like they can do it in the course of their lifetime. And I believe all of those are important things for us to keep in mind as we have debates, as we have issues that impact the country and impact our communities. It's easy to be in the doom and gloom business. It's easy to be in the cynic business. Nothing's easier than being a cynic. And so we have to kind of check it at the door every once in a while to say, wait a minute, there is a lot of optimism in this country. We have our problems and flaws, to be sure. And I think there are incredible opportunities ahead. You've heard me say it before. I'm very bullish on the future of this country. I can be pessimistic at times about our politics and our politicians, but I'm bullish on the country. And the reason I'm bullish on the country is because I trust the American people. And that makes it very easy to be optimistic and confident. Had the opportunity to walk in the 24th of July parade yesterday. That'll restore your confidence in humanity. You just look around, and it's people coming together from all walks of life, from all the different communities. And you say, you know what? We're going to be all right. This group is diverse, and this group can come together to solve problems, and we can do it a lot better right here at the local level. And so I want to round out the show today by just hitting a couple of things as it relates to this idea of opportunity and can I live a version of the American dream? Of course, more older Americans feel like they're already there because they're on the back half. They've achieved some things. They have some security, so it's easier for them to be optimistic. Young people in the country are a little more pessimistic about whether or not they can achieve their version of the American dream. But I think it's all about this idea of upward mobility and what is it that makes that possible? What role does government play? Where does government get in the way of people pursuing that version, their own version of the American dream? I was thinking back today, a conversation I had with Robert Doar, who's the president CEO of AEI, and we were talking about this idea of upward mobility. And where that happens, of course, we know that Utah is a center of upward mobility, that someone born into poverty or someone who falls into poverty in this state has a better chance of not just getting out of poverty, but actually working their way into the middle class than anywhere else in the country. And so Robert Doar made some interesting comments to me as we chatted about all of this. He said there is upward mobility all over America, and the American dream is not dead, and it's especially not dead in the state of Utah. Doar continued and said, we tend to get very cynical and down about the opportunities that do exist. But upward mobility, the ability to pursue individual and family dreams, often gets stymied with programs that provide those in poverty exactly what they need to stay precisely where they are from an economic standpoint. And so we have to transcend that. And does government have a role to play? Of course. Of course. And we should check it to make sure it's being done well, that it's actually producing the right results, that it is helping people with an on-ramp, a hand up, whatever you want to call it, but a path that will lead them to self-reliance, independence, upward mobility. And we've had a number of guests on this show over the last few weeks that have talked about the things that the data continue to tell us in terms of a success sequence. If young people want to be confident that they're not going to fall into poverty, the success sequence, the data is undeniable. If they get education, if they start to work, if they get married, and then they have children, that success sequence gives you about a 97% chance that you won't be in poverty by the time you get to your late 20s and 30s. That's what the data shows. And so while it's easy to get pessimistic about a lot of these things, I think we have to go back and just remember, cynics and skeptics, easiest job on the planet. And they often question what individuals, what communities can do. And to me, one of the reasons why I have absolute confidence in the future of our country and the ability for all to pursue their version of the American dream, it's actually a little Dr. Seuss-ish. He actually had the perfect response for those among us, the mental curmudgeons, I like to refer to them as, the cynics and the skeptics. He wrote, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And the cumulative effect of all the good currently being sent out into the world will make a difference. Not just now, but for a very long time to come. Jack Kemp said the power of one person doing the right thing for the right reason at the right time is the greatest influence in our society and should give us all great confidence in the future. Well, that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson, and as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something today that will make a difference.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Good afternoon. It's